I don't even know if I should be typing this. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hit the right keys, and the light from the monitor is hurting my eyes. God, everything hurts. My skin feels too tight, like it doesn't fit anymore, like something underneath is trying to push its way out. But I have to get this out. I have to tell someone before the sun comes up, because I don't think I'm going to be the same person when the light hits these windows. You need to understand, I wasn't looking for this. I wasn't some thrill seeker playing with Ouija boards in a graveyard or chanting Latin in a basement. I was just Cynthia. Just a florist in a dying town in Ohio that the rest of the country forgot about 20 years ago. I was just trying to pay the electric bill. I was just trying to keep the only thing my grandmother left me from being boarded up and turned into another vape shop or a payday loan center. That's how the devil gets you, isn't it? He doesn't show up with horns and a pitchfork. He shows up when you're staring at a stack of final notice envelopes, smelling the rot of dying lilies, wondering why God decided to abandon you. He shows up in the desperation. It started about 3 months ago. My shop, Eden's Petals, is located on the corner of 4th and Main. It used to be a beautiful spot. My nana opened it in the 70s. Back then, steel was king, and men bought their wives roses just because it was Tuesday. Now the steel mills are rusted skeletons, the sky is permanently gray, and the only people buying flowers are doing it for funerals. So many funerals. Overdoses, suicides, heart attacks from years of bad food and hopelessness. The death industry is the only thing booming around here. But even with the funerals, I was drowning. The cooler, this massive, walk-in industrial refrigerator from 1985, kept breaking down. The compressor would rattle and cough like a dying smoker, and the temperature would fluctuate wildly. Do you know what happens to high-end Ecuadorian roses when the temperature spikes? They turn to mush. They brown at the edges. They smell like wet, dirty laundry. I was throwing away thousands of dollars of inventory every week. I remember the night it started. It was a Tuesday. It was raining, that cold, miserable mid-November rain that soaks into your bones and makes you feel like you'll never be warm again. I was in the back room, standing over a prep table covered in green stems and thorn strippings. I had a wedding order for the weekend. The only wedding order I'd had in 6 months. The Miller girl was marrying some guy from out of state, and her mother had dropped $3,000 on centerpieces. $3,000. That money was going to save me. It was going to pay the compressor repairman and keep the lights on for another month. But when I opened the wholesale boxes, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to vomit. The hydrangeas were wilted. The peonies were drooping, their heads hanging low like they were ashamed. And the roses. God, the roses looked gray. Not red. Gray. They were limp. Dead on arrival. I panicked. I really lost it. I started hyperventilating, grabbing the stems, trying to cut them underwater, trying every trick Nana had taught me. Sugar water, bleach, aspirin, nothing worked. They just laid there on the metal table, mocking me. A $3,000 pile of compost. I sank to the floor. The concrete was freezing. I pulled my knees to my chest and I just wept. I didn't pray. I should have prayed. I should have called out to Jesus right then and there, asked for peace, asked for a way out. But I was so angry. I was angry at the economy, angry at the cooler, angry at this town. I felt so isolated. Look, before I keep going, I need to know I'm not just screaming into the void here. The silence in this room is heavy, like the air is thick with something I can't see. It helps me to know there are real people out there, living real lives, away from this darkness. Where are you listening from right now? Just type your city or state in the comments. Are you in a city? Or are you out in the country like me, where the dark feels a little deeper. Please, just let me know you're there. It makes me feel less like I'm already dead. I was sitting on that cold floor, and I slammed my hand down on the prep table in frustration. I wasn't looking. My hand came down hard right on top of a pair of heavy-duty floral shears I'd left open. The blade was carbon steel, razor sharp. It sliced right into the meat of my palm, deep, right below the thumb. I gasped, pulling my hand back. The pain was sharp and hot, shocking me out of my pity party. Blood welled up instantly, dark and thick, dripping down my wrist. I scrambled to stand up, knocking into the table. As I stumbled, I instinctively waved my hand, and a spray of blood, just a few heavy drops, splattered across the tray of dying white roses. I grabbed a rag, wrapping my hand tight, swearing under my breath. Great, Cynthia. Just great. Now you're bleeding on the merchandise. I went to the sink to wash the cut. The water was rusty, the pipes groaning. I wrapped it in duct tape and paper towels, the poor man's bandage, and turned back to the table to sweep the ruined flowers into the trash. That's when I saw it. I froze. The humming of the broken cooler seemed to stop. The rain against the window seemed to silence itself. The 3 roses that had been hit by my blood, they were standing up. I blinked, thinking maybe I was lightheaded from the panic. But no. I walked closer, my heart hammering a weird rhythm against my ribs. The other roses in the box were still limp and gray, looking like dead tissue. But the three that had the red speckles on their petals, they were vibrant. And I don't mean they looked fresh. I mean they looked perfect. The white petals were glowing with a pearl-like sheen. The stems, which had been a dull olive color, were now a rich, deep, impossible emerald green. The leaves looked like they had been polished with wax. They were the most beautiful flowers I had ever seen in my life. I touched one. It felt firm. Cold, but alive. It vibrated slightly under my finger. Not like a machine vibrates, like a cat purring. A low, biological hum. What in the world? I whispered. My voice sounded flat in the empty shop. I looked at my bandaged hand. The duct tape was already soaking through with red. I looked at the rest of the dying order. The Miller wedding was in 3 days. I had no money to replace these. If I didn't deliver, I'd have to refund the deposit I'd already spent on the electric bill. I'd be ruined. A thought crept into my head. It didn't feel like my thought. It felt like a suggestion whispered directly into my ear canal, slippery and cold. It's just a little organic matter. Nitrogen. Iron. That's all it is. I swallowed hard. My mouth tasted like copper. I looked at the shears sitting in the pool of water and stems. This is crazy, I said out loud. Cynthia, you are losing your mind. It was a coincidence. The shock of the cold water or something. But I knew it wasn't. Deep down, in that reptilian part of your brain that knows when a predator is in the room, I knew this was something else. But desperation is a powerful drug. It blinds you. It makes you rationalize the insane. I unwrapped my hand. The cut was still oozing. I held my hand over a bunch of hydrangeas that looked like dried paper. I squeezed my fist. Drip. 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 3 drops hit the center of the blue petals. I watched, holding my breath. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a sound. Like the crackling of dry leaves being stepped on. The stems twitched. I jumped back, bumping into the sink. The hydrangeas didn't just perk up. They surged. The brown edges receded as if time was rewinding. The blue deepened into a color I can only describe as ocean at midnight. They stood tall, stiff, and proud. The air around them suddenly smelled sweet, overpoweringly sweet, like perfume and something muskier. Like sweat. I should have run. I should have burned the shop down right then and there. I should have realized that nature doesn't work backwards. Death doesn't turn into life without a cost. But I didn't run. I saved the order. I spent the next hour milking the cut on my hand. It stung, it throbbed, but I got enough out to sprinkle the entire wedding order. By 3 a.m., the back room looked like a botanical garden in heaven. Every flower was perfect. Unnaturally large, impossibly colorful. I went home and slept for 12 hours. When I woke up, I felt drained. Not just tired, empty. Like someone had hooked a vacuum up to my soul and sucked out the joy. But I chalked it up to the stress and the blood loss. The wedding was a hit. The bride cried. She said the flowers looked like they were glowing. She posted photos all over Instagram. People started calling. Hey, I saw those flowers from the Miller wedding. Can you do a bouquet for my anniversary? I need an arrangement for a funeral, but I want those special roses. Business picked up. For the first time in 5 years, the account was in the black. I fixed the cooler. I paid the rent. I even bought a new coat. But the flowers, they were hungry. That's the thing about sin, isn't it? It's never a one-time transaction. It's a subscription. And the price always goes up. At first, a few drops were enough. I'd prick my finger with a diabetic lancet I bought at the pharmacy. Just a tiny bead of blood mixed into the watering can. The tulips would bloom in January. The lilies would last for 3 weeks without water. But then, about a month in, the lancet wasn't enough. I had a rush order for a funeral. A local politician. Big money. I prepared the mix, water, plant food, and the prick of my finger. I sprayed the wreaths. Nothing happened. I waited. The carnations stayed limp. The ferns looked brown. Come on, I whispered, shaking the spray bottle. Come on, you greedy little things. I pricked another finger. Added more. Nothing. The shop was silent. But then, I heard it. A sound coming from the drain in the floor. A gurgling sound. But it wasn't water. It sounded like a throat clearing. More. I spun around. Who's there? The shop was empty. The front windows were dark, reflecting the streetlights outside. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch, reaching toward the center of the room. More, the whisper came again. It wasn't audibly spoken. It vibrated in my teeth. It was a hunger. I could feel the hunger radiating from the flowers on the table. They weren't just plants anymore. They were waiting. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I looked at the clock. The funeral was at 10 a.m. It was 2 a.m. I had no backup plan. I grabbed a paring knife from the break room drawer. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Just this once, I told myself. Just to get through this order. Then I'm done. I'm going back to normal wholesalers. I don't care if the quality drops. I rolled up my sleeve. I didn't cut my palm this time. I chose the fleshy part of my forearm. I gritted my teeth and sliced. The pain was searing. But as the blood hit the table, the reaction was instantaneous. The flowers didn't just bloom, they hissed. A low, steam-like sound as they absorbed the red liquid. The carnations turned a deep, violent crimson. The ferns uncurled like spider legs. The atmosphere in the room changed. The air pressure dropped. My ears popped. The smell of copper and rot filled the small space, masking the scent of the blooms. I bandaged my arm, feeling dizzy. I sat in the chair in the corner, watching the flowers. They seemed to be watching me back. The heads of the roses were all turned slightly toward where I was sitting. That was the night I started seeing the man. I was dozing off, exhausted from the blood loss, when I saw him in the reflection of the cooler door. He was standing right behind me. Tall. Wearing a suit that looked like it was made of charcoal smoke. He had no face, just a blur where features should be. But I knew he was smiling. I could feel the smile. It was the smile of a loan shark who knows the debtor can never pay up. I whipped around, screaming. There was no one there. Just the flowers, vibrant and pulsing in the dim light. I told myself I was hallucinating. Anemia. Sleep deprivation. I went to the doctor, got iron supplements, ate more steak. But the hunger didn't stop. The shop became famous. People drove from Pittsburgh and Cleveland just to buy Eden's petals. They said my flowers had a presence. They said they lasted forever. They didn't know why. I was cutting myself 3 times a week now. My arms were a roadmap of scars. I wore long sleeves, even with the heater cranking. I was pale, gaunt. I looked like a junkie, but instead of heroin, I was addicted to the success. Addicted to the feeling of power I had when I made something dead come back to life. But the worst part wasn't the cutting. It was the whispers. They were getting louder. And they weren't just saying more anymore. They were telling me things. Secrets. I'd be arranging a bouquet for a customer, and the flowers would whisper, "He's cheating on her. The money is stolen. She hates her mother." I thought I was going insane. But then, the customers would confirm it. The woman buying the anniversary bouquet would break down crying about her husband's affair. The man buying the "get well soon" arrangement would be arrested for embezzlement a week later. I had tapped into something. Or something had tapped into me. 2 weeks ago, a woman came in. Her name was Sarah. She was young, maybe 22, but she looked like she carried the weight of the world. She wanted a wreath for a baby. A crib death. My heart broke for her. I really, truly felt for her. I wanted to give her something beautiful. I went to the back. I didn't want to cut. I really didn't. I was so tired. My body was aching. I fell to my knees on the dirty tile floor. "God," I whispered. It was the first time I'd spoken to him in years. "God, please. Just help me make these nice without the blood. Please." I waited. Silence. Then, a laugh. A dry, rasping laugh from the corner of the room where the shadows were darkest. "He doesn't hear you, Cynthia. You work for us now." I scrambled up, terrified. I grabbed the knife. I didn't have a choice, did I? That poor woman needed her flowers. It was a kindness, right? I was suffering so she could have a moment of beauty. That's sacrificial love, isn't it? That's how I twisted it. That's how the enemy twists it. He makes your self-destruction look like martyrdom. I cut deep. Deeper than before. I felt the cold swoop of shock instantly. I splattered the white lilies. They turned pink. Baby pink. The exact color of a nursery. I brought them out to Sarah. She gasped. She touched them, and for a second, her face lit up with a fragile peace. "They're perfect," she whispered. "They feel warm." She left. I locked the door and slid down against it, clutching my bleeding arm. That night, I went home, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man in the gray suit standing at the foot of my bed. He was getting closer. I could see details now. He wore a tie made of snakeskin. His hands were long, with too many joints. And he spoke to me. Not a whisper this time. A clear, calm voice. You're running dry, Cynthia. The soil needs more than just a sprinkle. We need a harvest. I sat up, turning on the lamp. Leave me alone. I screamed at the empty room. I'm done. No more. You can't stop, the voice said, echoing from the hallway. The debt isn't paid. And tomorrow you're going to get a very special order. I didn't know what he meant. I stayed awake all night, clutching a rosary I hadn't used since my confirmation, shivering. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the mayor. Cynthia, he said, his voice booming. We have a VIP coming to town. The governor. He's touring the old mill sites. We're holding a massive banquet at the town hall. I need you to do the stage. I need it to be spectacular. I'm talking thousands of flowers. A wall of roses. Can you do it? I did the math in my head. A wall of roses. Thousands of blooms. I looked at my scarred arms. I didn't have enough blood in my body to feed that many flowers. It would kill me. I don't know, Mayor, I stammered. Budget is no issue, Cynthia, he said. $50,000. Cash. 50,000. That was my mortgage. That was my debt. That was freedom. I'll do it, I said. The words tasted like ash. I hung up. I stared at the phone. How? How was I going to do this? I looked out the window of the shop. A stray dog was limping across the street. A ragged thing, no collar, ribs showing. A thought slammed into my mind. Violent. Horrific. It doesn't have to be your blood. I gagged. No, I said aloud. No, no, no. But the shop grew cold. The temperature plummeted. The flowers in the cooler began to tap against the glass. Tap. 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 Like impatient fingers. I grabbed my coat and ran out the back door. I needed air. I needed to get away from the smell of the shop. I walked down the alleyway, the gravel crunching under my boots. I turned the corner and ran smack into someone. Whoa there, lady, a voice said. It was a man. Homeless, by the looks of him. Older, bearded, smelling of cheap whiskey and old grime. He was holding a cardboard sign. You got $1? He asked, his eyes yellow and watery. Just $1 for a cup of coffee? I looked at him. I looked at his veins, thick and blue under the dirt on his hands. Nobody would miss him, the voice whispered. He's in pain anyway. You'd be setting him free. I stumbled back, horror washing over me. Get away from me. I yelled, reaching into my purse and throwing a handful of quarters at him just to make him stop looking at me. I ran back to my car and drove. I drove for hours. But I couldn't outdrive the voice. I couldn't outdrive the deal I had made. I went back to the shop that night. I had to prep the structures for the governor's banquet. I had the wire frames set up. I had the dry floral foam ready. I didn't have the flowers yet. I needed the ingredient. I was standing there, weeping, holding the knife, wondering if I should just slice my wrists and end it all right there. Let the flowers drink me dry and be done with it. Then, the bell above the front door chimed. I froze. It was 11 p.m. I had locked the door. I knew I had locked the door. I walked slowly from the back room into the front shop. The door was open. The wind was blowing in, swirling dead leaves across the floor. And standing in the center of the shop was the homeless man from the alley. But he wasn't begging. He was standing straight. His eyes weren't yellow anymore. They were black. Pitch black. No whites. He smiled. And when he smiled, his mouth opened too wide, revealing rows of sharp, gray teeth. "You dropped these," he said. He opened his hand. The quarters I had thrown at him fell to the floor. Clink. 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 "We accept a different currency here, Cynthia," he said. His voice was the voice of the man in the gray suit. He took a step toward me. I backed up, hitting the counter. "What do you want?" "I'm here to help you with the governor's order," he said. "I'm the donation." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something. It wasn't a weapon. It was a baby bird. A robin. It was alive, chirping weakly. He crushed it in his hand. Just like that. A wet crunch. He threw the mess onto a display of white lilies near the door. The lilies exploded into color. They grew 3 feet in seconds, twisting and wrapping around the doorframe like jungle vines. They turned a red so dark it was almost black. "See?" he grinned. "Animal blood is potent. But human blood has soul in it, Cynthia. That's the premium fertilizer." He stepped closer. "And tonight," he whispered, "we're going to make the most beautiful garden this town has ever seen." He lunged at me. I squeezed my eyes shut and threw my arms up to protect my face, waiting for the bite, waiting for the teeth to tear into my neck. I screamed, a raw, jagged sound that scraped against my throat, but the pain didn't come. Instead, a hand clamped around my wrist. It wasn't a human grip. It felt like cold iron, like the freezing metal of a car door handle in the dead of winter. It burned with cold. He didn't pull me down. He yanked my hand forward, forcing the hand holding the paring knife right up to his own throat. I opened my eyes, gasping, trying to pull back, but I was powerless against him. He was impossibly strong for a man who looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. His black eyes were wide, ecstatic, staring into mine with a terrifying intimacy. "Do it, Cynthia," he hissed, his breath smelling of sulfur and rot. "The soil is dry. The governor is waiting. Do it." "No." I sobbed, digging my heels into the linoleum, trying to wrench the knife away. "Let me go." "I won't." "You already have," he smiled. "You chose this when you spilled that first drop. You chose this when you took the money. Now finish the job." He squeezed my wrist. I felt the bones grinding together. The pain was blinding. My fingers spasmed involuntarily, tightening around the handle of the knife. With a jerk that wasn't mine, he pulled my hand across his own throat. It wasn't a clean cut. It was ragged. Deep. The sound. God, the sound. It was like a zipper opening, followed by a wet, heavy splash. He didn't scream. He laughed. A gurgling, bubbling laugh that choked off as the blood erupted. He let go of me then, staggering back. He fell right into the center of the work table, knocking over buckets of water and stems. He landed on top of the wire frames I had set up for the governor's wall of roses. I scrambled backward, slipping on the wet floor, crawling until my back hit the display case. I couldn't look away. I wanted to, but I couldn't. The blood didn't pool on the floor. That's the part that still wakes me up screaming. It didn't make a mess on the tiles. As he lay there twitching, the flowers in the buckets around the room, they moved. The stems of the roses elongated, whipping out like snakes. The ivy I had prepped for the filler greenery shot across the table, wrapping around his ankles, his wrists, his neck. They were drinking him. I watched in paralyzed horror as the roots of the hydrangeas burst through their plastic pots, crawling over the table like white worms, burying themselves into the open wound in his neck. The sound changed from gurgling to a frantic, wet sucking noise. Slurp. 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 The man, the thing, was shrinking. His skin was turning gray, then papery and translucent. The flowers were pulsing with light. The red roses turned a color I've never seen in nature, a red so dark it sucked the light out of the room, vibrating with energy. The white lilies turned crimson, the veins in their petals throbbing like little hearts. I need you to listen to me very carefully right now. I know how this sounds. I know you're sitting there, maybe in your car, maybe in your bedroom with the lights off, thinking this is just a story. You're thinking, that's creepy, and you're ready to scroll to the next video if this gets too boring. Don't. Please, I am begging you, do not look away. If you are listening to this, if you have ever felt that desperation I talked about, that willingness to do anything to make the pain stop, you are in danger. I am telling you this because I want to save you from where I am going. Hit that subscribe button, not because I care about the numbers, but because I need you to be here for the end of this. I need you to hear what happens when you think you can control the darkness. I need you to understand that the devil doesn't take payment in installments, he takes the whole soul. You need to hear this warning before it's too late for you, too. I sat there on the floor for what felt like hours, but it must have only been minutes. The sucking sound stopped. The rustling of leaves ceased. The shop fell dead silent. I stood up, my legs trembling so violently I had to hold on to the counter. I walked toward the prep table. The man was gone. There was no body. No bones. No blood on the floor. There was just a pile of dirty, ragged clothes, a flannel shirt, torn jeans, one boot, lying in the middle of a jungle. The flowers for the governor's banquet were finished. They were magnificent. They were monstrously beautiful. The wall of roses had woven itself together without my help. It was a solid tapestry of deep, velvet blooms, thick and lush. They smelled like heaven, masking the faint, lingering scent of copper. I should have called the police. I should have called 911 and said, a man just killed himself in my shop and my plants ate him. But who would believe me? They would see the clothes. They would see me, covered in blood splatter. They would check the DNA. They would lock me up. And, God help me. I looked at the flowers. They were worth $50,000. Maybe more. If I delivered them, the debt was gone. The shop was saved. I was free. If I called the police, I lost everything. He was just a drifter, the voice whispered. It sounded soothing now. Like a mother comforting a child. Nobody knows his name. He gave himself to the cause. Don't let his gift go to waste, Cynthia. I walked to the sink. I washed the blood off my face. I washed my hands until they were raw. I put the dirty clothes in a black trash bag and buried them at the bottom of the dumpster out back. Then, I loaded the van. The drive to the town hall was a blur. It was 6 a.m. now. The sun was trying to come up, but the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with clouds. The town looked different to me. The shadows stretched too far. The faces of the people I passed in their cars looked hollow, like masks. I arrived at the venue. The event planners were there, stressed and shouting into headsets. The florist is here, someone yelled. They opened the back of my van. Silence. Absolute silence swept through the loading dock. My God, the head planner whispered. She reached out to touch a rose, then pulled her hand back, as if she felt the heat radiating from it. These are. Cynthia, these are incredible. I've never seen anything like this. I didn't smile. I couldn't feel my face. Just be careful, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a radio in another room. They're fragile. We set up the stage. The wall of roses was the backdrop for the podium where the governor would speak. As we moved them, I could hear them whispering. Not words this time, just a low, contented humming. They were full. They were satisfied. The banquet started at 7 p.m. I was invited to stay. The mayor insisted. He wanted to show off the local talent. I stood in the back of the room, wearing my best dress, clutching a glass of water. The room was packed. The town's elite, the business owners, the politicians. They were eating steak and laughing, completely unaware that they were breathing in the scent of a dead man. The governor took the stage. He was a charismatic man, silver hair, perfect teeth. He stood in front of my wall of roses. As he started speaking about revitalizing the heartland and new beginnings, I saw something. A petal from one of the roses directly behind his head fell. It drifted down slowly, landing on his shoulder. He brushed it off, smiling. Then another fell. And another. The flowers were moving. Subtle, slow movements. They were leaning toward him. I felt a spike of panic. No. Not now. Not here. I looked around the room. No one else seemed to notice. They were captivated by the speech. But then, I made eye contact with someone. Sitting at the table nearest to the stage was a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't eating. He was wearing a gray suit. A perfectly tailored, charcoal gray suit. He was looking directly at me. It was him. The man from my visions. The man from the mirror. But he was real. He was solid. He was sitting there, twirling a wine glass filled with a dark red liquid. He raised the glass to me in a mock toast. My stomach dropped. I looked back at the stage. The governor was coughing. He cleared his throat, taking a sip of water. He looked pale. He loosened his tie. It's getting a little warm in here, he joked into the microphone. The roses behind him were glowing. A faint, red luminescence that was getting brighter. The hum was getting louder, I could hear it over the sound system now. A low feedback loop. Hum. The governor stumbled. He grabbed the podium. He gasped. He touched his chest. Suddenly, he doubled over, vomiting violently. But it wasn't food. He was vomiting rose petals. Dozens of them. Wet, red petals spilling out of his mouth, choking him. The crowd screamed. People jumped up, knocking over chairs. The governor fell to his knees, clawing at his throat. More petals poured out, followed by thorny stems. He was gagging, eyes bulging. I stood frozen in the back of the room. I knew what was happening. The flowers weren't just eating the dead anymore. They were spreading. The spores. The scent. We had all been breathing it in for hours. Security rushed the stage. They dragged the governor away, still hacking up plant matter. The banquet dissolved into chaos. I turned to run. I had to get out. I pushed through the panicked crowd, bumping into bodies. Wait! A hand grabbed my arm. I spun around, terrified it was the police. It was the mayor. He looked frantic, sweating. Cynthia! What kind of flowers were those? He shouted over the noise. I don't know, I stammered. He pulled me closer. His eyes were wild. Because my wife, she took a centerpiece home earlier. She called me. She said the flowers are talking to her. I ripped my arm away. Throw them out. I screamed. Burn them. Burn them all. I ran out the double doors into the cool night air. I made it to my van and locked the doors, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. I fumbled with the keys, dropping them on the floor mat. As I reached down to grab them, I saw something in the passenger seat. It was a check. A check for $50,000. And next to it, a single business card. Heavy stock. Cream-colored. It read, "The contract is binding." There was no phone number. No address. Just a symbol embossed in the corner, a serpent wrapped around a rose. I drove home. I didn't go back to the shop. I couldn't. I went straight to my house, a small bungalow on the edge of town. I locked the deadbolt. I pushed the sofa in front of the door. I closed all the blinds. I sat in the middle of my living room floor, clutching the check. I was rich. I was safe. But then I heard the sound. It was coming from the kitchen. Clink. 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 The sound of silverware on a plate. I stopped breathing. I live alone. I slowly stood up. I walked toward the kitchen doorway. The light was on. I hadn't left it on. I peeked around the corner. Sitting at my small, round kitchen table was the man in the gray suit. He was eating a steak. Rare. Bloody. He looked up at me, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. His face. I could see it clearly now. He was handsome, in a sharp, terrifying way. But his eyes were empty. Not black like the homeless man's, but hollow. Like deep wells with no bottom. "Cynthia," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured. "You missed a lovely party." "Get out," I whispered. "Get out of my house." He chuckled, picking up his wine glass. "Your house?" "Oh, no, my dear. You misunderstood." He stood up, towering over the table. The kitchen seemed to stretch, the walls moving further away, making me feel small, like a doll in a dollhouse. "You accepted the payment," he said, pointing a long finger toward the living room where I had dropped the check. "You delivered the harvest. You fed the soil." He walked toward me. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor. "The shop was just the incubator," he said, stopping inches from my face. I could smell the roses on him. "But you are the garden, Cynthia." He reached out and touched my cheek. His finger burned like ice. "And it's time to plant the real seed." I tried to scream, but my throat closed up. I felt something moving inside my chest. A tightening. A winding. I looked down at my arms. Underneath the skin of my forearms, I could see them. Green veins. Moving. Pulsing. Vines were growing inside my veins. "What did you do to me?" I choked out. "I didn't do anything," he smiled, and his teeth were made of thorns. "You opened the door. You invited us in. You traded blood for blooms. Now, you belong to the flora." He turned and walked toward the back door of the kitchen. "Get some rest," he said over his shoulder. "We have a lot of work to do. The whole town needs to be replanted. And you're going to help me do it." He opened the door and stepped out into the night. But as the door swung shut, I saw that outside my kitchen window, it wasn't my backyard anymore. It was a field. A vast, endless field of those dark, red roses, stretching under a black sky as far as the eye could see. And in the middle of the field, fires were burning. I sank to the floor, clawing at my arms, trying to rip the vines out, but they were deep. They were part of me now. And then, the phone rang. It rang loud and shrill in the silent house. I stared at it. It was the landline. Only my Nana used to call that number. I crawled over to it. I picked up the receiver. Hello? I whispered. A voice came through. It was raspy, wet, gurgling. It was the homeless man. It's cold down here, Cynthia, he bubbled. But the roots are warm. They're waiting for you. Why are you keeping them waiting? I slammed the phone down. I curled into a ball. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I truly tried to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven. Screech. A high-pitched noise tore through the room. The lights flickered and died. In the dark, right next to my ear, the man's voice whispered. He can't hear you over the screaming of the flowers. I didn't sleep. You don't sleep when you can feel your own body turning into a trellis for something ancient and evil. I spent the rest of that night in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile with the door locked, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like me, Cynthia, the florist, the woman who pays her taxes and drives a 2014 Honda Civic. But I wasn't her anymore. Under the fluorescent vanity lights, I watched my arms. The green veins were still there. They were subtle now, like faint bruising, but if I held my breath and focused, I could see them pulsing. Not with the rhythm of a heartbeat, but with a slow, hydraulic churning. I did something stupid then. Something desperate. I opened the medicine cabinet and took out a fresh razor blade. I sanitized it with rubbing alcohol. I told myself it was just a parasite. Just a spore infection. If I could just cut it out, if I could just find the main root, I could kill it. I gripped the sink with my left hand and brought the blade down on my right forearm, right over the thickest green line. I sliced. I expected blood. I expected pain. I got the pain, a sharp, stinging burn, but I didn't get blood. A thick, milky white sap oozed out of the cut. It smelled like cut grass and formaldehyde. And then, the thing inside me reacted. The vein, it writhed. It literally thrashed under my skin like a trapped worm. I dropped the razor, screaming, clutching my arm. The skin around the cut began to knit itself back together instantly. Not healing, growing. Tiny green tendrils shot out from the wound, weaving across the open flesh, stitching it shut in seconds. The scar it left wasn't pink skin. It was a rough, bark-like patch of brown tissue. I fell back against the bathtub, hyperventilating. It wouldn't let me hurt it. It was protecting itself. It was protecting its host. I needed a doctor. I didn't care about the police anymore. I didn't care about the $50,000 or the man in the gray suit. I needed someone with a medical degree to tell me I wasn't turning into a plant. I grabbed my keys and ran out to the car. It was 4 a.m. The town of Oakhaven was dead quiet. But it was a heavy quiet. The streetlights were buzzing loudly, flickering yellow and orange. As I drove down Main Street toward the county hospital, I noticed the yards. Every house I passed, the lawns were too green. It was November in Ohio. The grass should have been dormant, brown, patchy. But these lawns were lush, vibrant, emerald green. And the trees, the oaks and maples that had been bare skeletons yesterday, were budding. In the dead of night, in the freezing cold, the town was blooming. I sped up. I ran a red light at the intersection near the high school. I pulled into the emergency room parking lot. There were only a few cars there. I parked crookedly across two spaces and sprinted for the sliding glass doors. The waiting room was empty except for a security guard asleep at the desk and a woman in the corner coughing into a handkerchief. The air inside smelled like antiseptic, which was a relief. It smelled like science. It smelled like safety. I marched up to the intake nurse. She was a heavy-set woman with tired eyes, typing on a computer. I need help, I slammed my hands on the desk. Something is wrong with my blood. I have an infection. She didn't look up immediately. Insurance card and ID? Look at me. I yelled, shoving my sleeve up. Look. She sighed, annoyed, and looked down at my arm. Her eyes went wide. She pushed her chair back. The patch of bark skin had spread. It was now covering my entire wrist. And the veins, they were glowing. Faintly, through the skin, a sickly bioluminescent green. Honey, she whispered, standing up. What did you get into? Poison ivy? Chemical burn? It's inside me, I sobbed. Please. It's moving. She hit a button on the wall. I need a triage team to the front. Possible biohazard. They rushed me back. They put me in a room with no windows. A doctor came in, Dr. Evans. I knew him. He had bought flowers from me for his wife's birthday last year. He looked young, exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Cynthia, he asked, looking at my chart. What's going on? Dr. Evans, you have to cut it out, I begged, grabbing his scrubs. I did something bad. I touched something I shouldn't have. It's roots. It's roots, doctor. He put on gloves, his face serious. Okay, calm down. Let's take a look. He examined my arm. He touched the bark skin. He frowned. He pressed his stethoscope to my forearm, listening. His face went pale. He pulled the stethoscope away and looked at it, then back at me. What? I asked. What is it? There's no pulse in your radial artery, he said quietly. But I hear something else. Swishing. Like fluid moving through a tube. Take an X-ray, I said. Please. Just look inside. He nodded, clearly disturbed. He ordered a portable X-ray machine. The tech came in, a young guy chewing gum, looking bored. They draped the lead vest over me. They positioned my arm. Click. We waited for the image to pop up on the digital monitor mounted on the wall. When it did, the tech stopped chewing his gum. Dr. Evans gasped. He stepped back, knocking over a tray of instruments. Clatter crash. On the screen, my bones were there, the radius and ulna. But wrapped around them, tight as a constrictor snake, were structures that shouldn't exist. They showed up bright white on the X-ray, denser than bone. They spiraled down my arm, drilling into the marrow. It's calcified, Dr. Evans whispered, his voice shaking. It's integrated into the skeletal structure. Cynthia, how long has this been there? Since last night, I said. Since the blood. That's impossible, he said. This kind of growth, this would take 20 years. And look. He pointed to the screen. It's not stopping at the shoulder. It goes into the chest cavity. He looked at me with pure fear. Not professional concern. Fear. The kind of fear a caveman feels when he sees fire for the first time. We need a chest X-ray. Now, he barked at the tech. They adjusted the machine. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. Click. The image refreshed. My ribs were there. My spine. But my lungs were filled with a web of white lace. My heart was encased in a thick, thorny cage of density. Oh my God, the tech muttered. Is she dead? I'm right here. I screamed. I'm alive. Help me. Dr. Evans was backing away toward the door. I need to call the CDC. I need to call someone. This isn't medical. This is. Before he could open the door, the lights in the hospital room flickered. BZZZT. The monitor screen distorted. The image of my infested chest static out. When the image came back, it wasn't my X-ray anymore. It was a face. A grainy, black and white, digital rendering of a face. It was the governor. But his jaw was unhinged. And coming out of his mouth were digital flowers, blooming in pixelated jerky movements. Dr. Evans stared at the screen. What the hell is? The intercom system in the hospital screeched. A high-pitched feedback whine that forced us all to cover our ears. Then, a voice came over the speakers. It wasn't the hospital operator. It was the smooth, cultured voice of the man in the gray suit. Paging Dr. Evans. Paging Dr. Evans. You are attempting to weed the garden. This is against Homeowners Association regulations. Dr. Evans spun around to the intercom speaker on the wall. Who is this? Get off this channel. Diagnosis, the voice purred, echoing through the sterile room. Fertilizer deficiency. The ceiling tiles above the doctor's head exploded. Thick, wet roots burst through the drop ceiling like bursting pipes. They slammed into Dr. Evans, wrapping around his chest, his neck, his face. He didn't even have time to scream. The roots tightened, lifting him off the floor. I heard the sickening crunch of ribs snapping. The tech screamed and bolted for the door, but the door was jammed. Vines were growing out of the hinges, sealing us in. No! I shrieked, scrambling off the gurney. I backed into the corner. Stop it! Stop it! The roots held the doctor's broken body in the air. Then, one of the vines, tipped with a sharp, red thorn the size of a dagger, positioned itself over his heart. The debt must be paid, the voice on the intercom whispered. Thwack! The thorn plunged into his chest. But he didn't bleed red. As the vine drank from him, the color drained from his body instantly. He turned gray. And the vine turned a vibrant, pulsing red. It bloomed. Right there in the hospital room, a massive, blood-red hibiscus flower burst open from the doctor's chest cavity. The tech was pounding on the glass of the door. Let me out. Let me out. I looked at the vent near the floor. It was small, but the grate was loose. I didn't think. I just moved. The survival instinct is a powerful, ugly thing. I didn't try to save the tech. I knew he was dead. I knew we were all dead. I kicked the grate off. I squeezed into the dark, dusty ductwork. I crawled. Behind me, I heard the tech stop screaming. I heard the wet tearing sound of another harvest. I crawled until my knees were bleeding. I crawled through the bowels of the hospital, listening to the building groan. The whole structure was shifting. The roots were in the walls. They were in the foundation. I kicked out a vent into the parking lot and tumbled onto the asphalt. I gasped for air. The morning sun was up now. But the light was wrong. It wasn't yellow. It was a hazy, reddish-orange. I looked at the town. Oakhaven was gone. In its place was a jungle. The buildings, the bank, the post office, the grocery store, were draped in thick curtains of ivy and roses. Cars were stopped in the middle of the street, overgrown with moss. And the people. I saw a woman walking her dog down the sidewalk. But she wasn't walking. She was shambling. She was covered in daisies. They were growing out of her hair, her ears, the backs of her hands. Her eyes were glazed over, staring at nothing. She was smiling. A blissful, empty smile. She passed me, humming a low, buzzing tune. Beautiful day, she murmured. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. The master is so kind. I scrambled to my car. It was covered in pollen, thick yellow dust. I wiped the windshield and got in. The engine sputtered but started. I had to leave. I had to get to the interstate. If I could just get across the county line, maybe the signal would stop. Maybe the roots would die. I drove like a maniac, swerving around abandoned, vine-covered cars. I headed for the bridge, the only way out of town, crossing the Black River. I could see the bridge ahead. It was a steel suspension bridge. My heart leaped. Freedom. I floored the gas. 80 miles per hour, 90 miles per hour. But as I got closer, I slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, burning rubber. I stopped inches from the edge. The bridge was out. But it hadn't collapsed. A massive wall of thorns, briars thick as telephone poles, had erupted from the riverbed. They rose hundreds of feet into the air, blocking the road, tangling into the steel beams of the bridge, creating a solid, impenetrable barricade. And hanging from the thorns, like ornaments, were bodies. Deer. Stray dogs. And people. People in suits. People in pajamas. They were caught in the thorns, limp, drained of color. And in the center of the wall of thorns, formed by the twisted vines, was a shape. A giant cross. But it wasn't a cross of salvation. It was a mockery. It was made of dead wood and jagged spikes. I sat in my idling car, staring at the blockade. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. We weren't just infected. We were fenced in. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I didn't want to look. I knew who it was. I picked it up. A text message. Sender, unknown. There is no leaving the garden, Cynthia. You are the head gardener now. Come to the town square. It is time for Sunday service. I looked at my arms. The bark was spreading up my biceps. I could feel the roots tickling my collarbone. I wasn't Cynthia anymore. I was a vessel. But as I stared at that twisted cross on the bridge, a spark of something hot ignited in my chest. Not fear. Not despair. Anger. He had tricked me. He had used my desperation to destroy everything. He had killed the doctor. He had killed the homeless man. He had taken my town. I looked at the glove box. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a Bible. But I had a lighter. And I had a can of gasoline in the trunk for the lawnmower I used to use to keep the shop tidy. You want a gardener? I whispered, my voice raspy, sounding more like the flowers than a human. Fine. I put the car in reverse. I'll do some weeding. I spun the car around and headed back toward the center of town. Back toward the town square. Back toward the shop. I was going to burn it down. I was going to burn it all down. But I didn't know that fire, earthly fire, doesn't hurt demons. It just makes them laugh. And I didn't know that what was waiting for me in the town square wasn't just the man in the gray suit. It was something much, much older. And it was hungry for more than just blood. I drove back into the heart of Oakhaven, the gas can rattling in the passenger seat beside me. The smell of gasoline was sharp and toxic, but it was the only thing cutting through the cloying, suffocating scent of the flowers. That perfume, it was everywhere now. It wasn't just a smell, it was a taste. A thick, sugary, rotting sweetness that coated the back of my throat like syrup. Main Street was crowded. But it wasn't a riot. It wasn't a panic. It was a procession. Hundreds of people, my neighbors, the mailman, the lady who runs the bakery, the kids from the high school, were walking down the center of the road. They were walking in perfect unison. Left foot. Right foot. Thump. Thump. They weren't looking at me. They weren't looking at anything. Their eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites, and their mouths were hanging open. Vines were growing out of their ears, wrapping around their necks like jewelry. Some of them. God, some of them were dragging. Their legs had fused together with roots, so they were pulling themselves along the asphalt with their hands, leaving trails of that milky white sap behind them. I honked the horn. Get out of the way. I screamed, swerving around Mrs. Gable, the librarian. She didn't flinch. She just kept shuffling toward the town square. They were being called. Just like I was. I pulled up to the curb just outside the square. The town square used to be the pride of Oakhaven. A nice patch of grass, a Civil War statue, and a white wooden gazebo where the high school band played in the summer. Now, it looked like the inside of a stomach. The grass was gone. The ground was a pulsing mat of red and black vegetation. The trees were twisted into agonized shapes, their branches dripping with thick, red nectar. And the gazebo was the altar. It was covered in the governor's roses. Thousands of them. They were pulsating in time with a sound that was coming from beneath the ground. A deep, rhythmic thrum-thrum, thrum-thrum. I grabbed the gas can and the lighter. I kicked my car door open. Hey! I screamed. My voice cracked. Hey! I'm here. The procession stopped. All at once. 500 heads snapped toward me. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. Standing on the steps of the gazebo was the man in the gray suit. He looked immaculate. Not a speck of dirt on him. He was adjusting his cufflinks. Punctual, he called out, his voice carrying effortlessly over the distance. I appreciate that in an employee. I'm not your employee. I yelled. I uncapped the gas can. And I'm not your gardener. I ran forward. I didn't care about the people blocking my path. I shoved them aside. They felt cold and hard, like wood. I splashed the gasoline on the nearest cluster of thick, writhing roots. I splashed it on the people who had become plants. I splashed it until the can was light in my hand. You want a harvest? I screamed, tears streaming down my face. Here. I flicked the lighter. The flame caught the wind. No, a voice inside me shouted, not the demon's voice, but my own survival instinct. But I ignored it. I threw the lighter. The gasoline ignited with a whoosh. For a second, a glorious, beautiful second, I saw orange fire. I felt the heat. I saw the vines blacken and curl. I thought I had won. I thought I could purge this sickness with heat. But then, the man in the gray suit laughed. It wasn't a human laugh. It was the sound of a landslide. It was the sound of bedrock cracking. He raised his hand. The fire didn't go out. It changed. The orange flames turned a sickly, neon green. They grew taller, wilder. But they stopped burning the plants. Instead, the plants seemed to inhale the fire. The roses opened their petals wide and drank the flames. The vines glowed with a terrifying energy, energized by the heat. The fire wasn't destroying them. It was feeding them. You still don't understand the nature of this crop, Cynthia, the man said, walking down the steps of the gazebo, walking right through the wall of green fire as if it were a summer breeze. We are born of the pit. Do you really think a little unleaded gasoline hurts us? We are the fire. I dropped the empty can. I backed away, but I bumped into something hard. I turned around. It was the Civil War statue. But the stone soldier was gone. In its place was a massive, hulking shape made of thorns and muscle. It had the face of the homeless man I had killed. He grabbed me. His hands, huge, wooden claws, clamped onto my shoulders. Let me go. I shrieked, kicking and clawing. Bring her to the pulpit, the man in the gray suit commanded. The thorn beast dragged me toward the gazebo. I dug my heels into the ground, but the ground itself betrayed me. The grass blades turned into tiny fingers, grabbing my ankles, pulling me forward. They threw me onto the floor of the gazebo. I looked up. The roof of the structure was alive. It was a canopy of those black-red roses, and in the center, staring down at me, was a giant, blinking eye. An eye made of wet, shifting petals. The man in the gray suit stood over me. Up close, he was hideous. His skin was perfect, but it moved too much over the bones. Look at them, he gestured to the crowd. Look at your congregation. I looked out at the townspeople. They were all kneeling now. In the green light of the hellfire, they looked peaceful. They are free, he said softly. No more debt. No more cancer. No more divorce. No more loneliness. They are part of the one. They are connected. Isn't that what you humans always wanted? Connection? They're dead. I spat at him. You turned them into monsters. I gave them purpose, he hissed, his face contorting, momentarily revealing a glimpse of something scaly and red beneath the human mask. And you made it possible. You are the gateway, Cynthia. Your greed was the key. Your blood was the lubricant. He knelt down, bringing his face inches from mine. And now, we need to finalize the contract. You see, the governor was a nice appetizer. The doctor was a healthy snack. But to make this permanent, to make this garden cover the whole state, then the whole country, we need the heart of the gardener. He reached out and placed his hand on my chest. I felt it. I felt the roots inside me respond. They surged. My chest cracked. I screamed as my ribs shifted. The bark on my arms spread instantly, covering my neck, my jaw. I couldn't move my legs anymore. My feet had punched through the soles of my shoes and driven themselves into the wood of the gazebo floor. I was taking root. No. I wheezed. Please. It's beautiful, he whispered. You are going to be the centerpiece. A living statue of sin. He stood up and addressed the crowd. Brothers and sisters of the soil, he bellowed. Behold your queen. The crowd moaned, a low, discordant sound of worship. I felt my humanity slipping away. My thoughts were getting fuzzy. I could feel the thoughts of the others entering my mind. I could feel Mrs. Gable's hunger. I could feel the mayor's fear. I was becoming the network. I closed my eyes. I was done. There was no way out. The fire failed. The knife failed. I was a monster in a garden of monsters. I'm sorry, I thought. I'm so sorry. And then, I remembered the only thing I hadn't tried. The only thing I had been too proud, too angry, and too ashamed to use. The man in the gray suit had mocked my prayer earlier. He said God couldn't hear me over the screaming of the flowers. But he was lying. That's what they do. They lie. I couldn't speak. My mouth was stiffening, turning to wood. But in my mind, in the quiet, terrified center of my soul, I didn't recite a prayer. I didn't say a Hail Mary. I just screamed a name. Jesus. I didn't ask for help. I didn't ask to be saved. I just called his name because it was the only clean thing left in the universe. Jesus. The man in the gray suit froze. He stopped mid-sentence. He looked down at me, his eyes narrowing. Quiet, he snapped. Don't think that name here. He heard my thoughts. A surge of hope, hot and bright, shot through me. He was afraid. He was afraid of a name. Jesus, I thought louder. Jesus. 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 The ground beneath the gazebo shook. Not the rhythmic thrumming of the demon, this was an earthquake. A violent, jarring shake. The man stepped back, looking nervous. Stop it. I own you. You signed the contract. You own my sin. I screamed in my head. You don't own me. Jesus. Help me. The giant eye in the roof of the gazebo blinked rapidly and then, it burst. A beam of light, pure, white, blinding light, shot down from the sky. It wasn't sunlight. It was brighter than the sun. It punched through the clouds, through the canopy of roses, and slammed into the center of the gazebo. The man in the gray suit shrieked. It was a sound that shattered the windows of the buildings around the square. He threw his arms up, shielding his face. His skin began to smoke. Turn it off, he screamed. It burns. It burns. The light hit me. I expected it to kill me. I was full of the darkness. I was full of the roots. But it didn't burn me. It felt heavy. It felt like a weight pressing down on me, but a weight of love. Absolute, crushing, overwhelming love. And then I heard a voice. Not in my head. In the air. It sounded like rushing water. It sounded like thunder. I am the vine. You are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. The man in the gray suit fell to his knees. His suit disintegrated. The human mask melted away. And for the first time, I saw what he really was. He wasn't a man. He was a shadow. A pathetic, small, shivering shadow made of smoke and lies. He looked terrified. She's mine, the shadow screeched at the light. She gave blood. I gave more, the voice thundered. The light intensified. The roots inside my body, they began to burn. But this time, it was a holy fire. It hurt. God, it hurt more than the cutting. It felt like I was being ripped apart from the inside out. The bark on my arms cracked and fell off. The green veins turned black and withered. I vomited up a torrent of black bile and rose petals. I was being purged. The shadow creature tried to run. It tried to scurry into the cracks of the floorboards. Leave, the voice commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a law of physics. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. The shadow dissolved. It didn't fight. It didn't argue. It just ceased to exist. The wall of roses around the town square withered instantly. They turned to gray dust and blew away in a sudden, clean wind. The people, the congregation, they fell to the ground. The vines connecting them snapped. I lay on the floor of the gazebo, gasping for air, my body feeling raw and broken, but mine. The light began to fade, pulling back into the sky. But before it left, I felt one last thing. A hand. A warm, solid hand resting on my head for just a second. And then, silence. Real silence. No humming. No whispering. Just the sound of the wind and the distant weeping of people waking up from a nightmare. I lay there for a long time. I couldn't move. My arms were scarred, terrible white lines crisscrossing the skin, but they were human arms. I heard sirens in the distance. Real police sirens. The state troopers must have finally broken through the barricade on the bridge now that the thorns were gone. I rolled onto my back and looked up at the sky. It was blue. A cold, clear, November blue. I started to cry. Not out of fear. But because I knew what I had to do. I knew that just because the monster was gone, the consequences weren't. I sat up. The town square was a ruin. Dead, brown vegetation covered everything. People were wandering around, dazed, calling out names. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. I walked down the steps of the gazebo. A state trooper came running toward me, his gun drawn but pointed at the ground. He looked terrified. "Ma'am," he yelled. "Ma'am, are you okay? What happened here?" We saw a light." I looked at him. I looked at my scarred hands. "I need you to arrest me," I said, my voice hoarse. "What?" he asked, confused. "Ma'am, you look like a victim. You need a medic." "No," I said, holding out my wrists. "I'm not a victim. I'm the one who planted the garden." They didn't arrest me immediately. Not in the way you see on TV. There was no slamming me against the hood of the car, no reading me my rights while the sirens wailed. The troopers were too afraid to touch me. They treated me like I was radioactive. They handcuffed me with zip ties, wearing thick tactical gloves, and put me in the back of a hazmat van, not a cruiser. I sat in that metal box, staring at my hands. The white scars were raised and angry, crisscrossing my skin like a roadmap of hell. My body felt light. Impossibly light. For weeks, I had been carrying the weight of a twisted ecosystem inside my bones, the heavy, wet density of the roots. Now, I felt hollowed out. But it was a clean hollow. It was the feeling of a room that has been swept clean after a long, hoarding sickness. They took me to a federal holding facility in Columbus. I spent 3 weeks in quarantine. They ran every test known to modern medicine. They drew blood, my human, red blood, and analyzed it for pathogens, for hallucinogens, for some bioengineered weapon. They found nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. They found that my bone density was off the charts. They found that my heart had scar tissue on it, consistent with a massive trauma, as if something had squeezed it nearly to death. And they found the scars on my arms, which the dermatologist said looked like burns from a chemical that doesn't exist on the periodic table. I told them the truth. I sat in a white room with a metal table bolted to the floor, facing 2 FBI agents and a psychiatrist, and I told them everything. I told them about the failing shop. The first drop of blood. The man in the gray suit. The homeless man. Dr. Evans. The governor. They didn't believe me, of course. How could they? The official report, the one the public saw, said it was a mass hallucination event caused by a leak of experimental agricultural neurotoxins from the old mill site. They said the spores caused psychotic breaks and group hysteria. They said the governor died of a sudden, violent allergic reaction that caused his throat to close. They said Dr. Evans was killed by a structural collapse in the hospital caused by the frantic rioting of patients. They swept it under the rug. They buried the truth because the truth would break the world. But they couldn't bury the bodies. And they couldn't explain me. Because I wouldn't stop confessing. I admitted to the murder of the homeless man, John Doe number 4. I admitted to being an accessory to the death of Dr. Evans. I admitted to poisoning the town. They declared me criminally insane. Paranoid schizophrenia with delusions of grandeur and religious fixation. That's what the paperwork says. I've been in this institution for 5 years now. I have a small room. I have a window that looks out onto a parking lot. No grass. No trees. Just concrete. And I prefer it that way. I don't think I can ever look at a rose again without screaming. But I'm not writing this to complain about my confinement. In a way, this cell is my monastery. It's the only place I can be safe from myself. You see, the demon is gone. The shadow creature that wore the gray suit was banished by the name of Jesus. That part is over. But the consequences? The consequences are real. I have nightmares. Every night. I see the homeless man's face. I see the moment I chose to slice his throat. I see the trust in Sarah's eyes when I gave her the flowers for her dead baby, knowing they were fed by darkness. The guilt is a physical weight. It sits on my chest when I wake up. It tells me that I'm a monster. It tells me that a sorry at the last second doesn't fix the lives I destroyed. And for a long time, during my first year here, I believed that voice. I sat in the corner, rocking back and forth, thinking that even though the demon didn't get my soul, God surely didn't want it either. I was damaged goods. I was a murderer. I had literally hosted the enemy in my veins. Then, one Tuesday, the prison chaplain came by. He's an old man, Father Miller. He didn't know the details of my case, just that I was the crazy flower lady who killed people. He sat down on the other side of the glass. He opened his Bible. "Cynthia," he said softly. "I want to read you something." I shook my head. "Don't. It burns." "It doesn't burn," he said. That was the lie. The truth doesn't burn. It washes. He read from John 15. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me you can do nothing." I started sobbing. Ugly, racking sobs. Because I realized the mockery. The devil doesn't create anything. He can't. He has no power to create life. All he can do is twist what God has already made. God is the true vine. He offers life, connection, growth, and fruit. The man in the gray suit, he was the counterfeit vine. He offered connection, but it was bondage. He offered growth, but it was cancer. He offered fruit, but it was death. I had spent my whole life looking for that connection, for that success, for that feeling of being part of something. And because I didn't go to the true vine, I accepted the parasite. I looked at Father Miller. "Can he forgive me?" I whispered. "After what I did? I fed people to demons, Father. I literally fed them." Father Miller looked me in the eye. "Cynthia, look at the cross. Really look at it. What happened there?" I stayed silent. "Blood was spilled," he said. "But not like you did. You spilled the blood of others to save yourself. Jesus spilled his own blood to save his enemies." He leaned closer to the glass. "The debt is paid. Not by your blood. By his. You don't have to bleed for your flowers anymore, Cynthia." The price was $50,000? No. The price was infinite. And he wrote the check with his life. That was the moment I was truly saved. Not in the gazebo with the flash of light, that was just the rescue. The salvation happened in that quiet, gray cell when I finally accepted that I didn't have to earn my way back. I didn't have to fix it. I couldn't fix it. I just had to surrender. So, why am I telling you this? Why did I fight for access to this computer during my supervised hour? Because I know you. I don't know your name, and I don't know your face, but I know you. I know what it feels like to be drowning. I know what it feels like when the bills are piling up, or the loneliness is crushing you, or the depression feels like a physical weight. And I know that right now, there is a voice whispering to you. It might not be a man in a gray suit standing in your bedroom. It might be a thought. A suggestion. Just this once. Nobody will know. Take the money. Click the link. Drink the bottle. Harbor the hate. The enemy offers you a garden. He offers you a way out of the pain. He tells you that if you just give him a little bit, just a drop of your integrity, just a drop of your morality, he will make things bloom. He will give you the success, the pleasure, the relief you crave. He tells you it's organic. Natural. It's just a little sin. Everyone does it. I am here to tell you, with the scars on my arms and the ghosts in my head, that it is a lie. He does not want to help you. He wants to consume you. He starts with a drop. He ends with the marrow. You might be sitting there thinking, well, I'm not doing blood rituals with flowers, so I'm fine. Are you? What are you feeding your secret garden? What are you nurturing in the dark that you don't want anyone to see? Is it a secret relationship? Is it an addiction? Is it a hatred for a family member that you water every day with new grievances? Whatever it is, if it demands a sacrifice of your soul to stay alive, it is a demonic weed. And it will grow. It will wrap around your heart, and by the time you realize it has thorns, it will be too late to pull it out on your own. Don't wait until you are standing on the edge of the abyss. Don't wait until the roots are in your chest. You cannot negotiate with darkness. You cannot manage it. You cannot use it for good. There is only one gardener who can handle the weeds of this world. I am never getting out of this prison. I will die in this room. And that is justice. I accept it. But I am free. I am freer in this 8 by 10 cell than I ever was in that flower shop with $50,000 in my pocket. Because I know where I am going when I close my eyes for the last time. I am going to a garden where the roses don't have teeth. I am going to a place where the water is clear, not red. I am going to see the one who pulled me out of the fire. Please, listen to me. If you are holding a knife, metaphorically or literally, and you are thinking about making a deal to stop the pain, drop it. Drop it and run. Run to the light. Run to Jesus. Scream his name if you have to, just like I did. It doesn't have to be a pretty prayer. It just has to be real. He is waiting. He is powerful. And he is the only thing that scares the things in the dark. My time is up. The orderly is coming to turn off the terminal. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Do not let the seed take root. Wake up. Please, wake up. I'm praying for you. Signed, Cynthia.